guys are here, and my name is Justin, one of the pastors here at Hope City. And hold on, Brad, before you do that, I got to show you guys this. This is the coolest table I've ever had in my life. If my kids went to Carmel, it'd be really awesome. But look at that. It's got a Carmel logo on it. Isn't that amazing? Right there, I'm just going to have I don't know what that is. That a panther? Is that a tiger? Is that a lion? I don't know what that is. Cougar? It's a cougar. It's going to be like looking to eat me all the whole message. So anyway, well, I'm so glad that you guys are here. And before we dive into the message, actually probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I was made aware that this Sunday is Orphan Sunday. And I don't know if you know what that is. I didn't know what that was until probably a few years ago. But basically, across our country today, recognizing that there are orphans that are in our country and literally all over the world. And we don't know each other maybe well enough to dive into this deep end so quickly, but I found out about 6 years ago that I was adopted. And so it kind of changed how I viewed orphans. Even though I grew up with parents, I kind of retroactively felt this feeling of not being wanted. And just to think about the millions of orphans that are across our country, we just felt like as a church, even though this is our 9th week, so glad you guys got the memo on our change of venue, that you're here today. But I thought we should really talk about that. We should really do something about that. And so if you don't know what Orphan Sunday is, there's a video that we're going to watch together. It's about a 2-minute video just to kind of explain it. And I'm going to invite my friend Stacy Solomon up here to just talk to us about how we can be involved. And we can't help every single orphan, but we can help a few. And so take a look.
My child, you are my work of art. My hands have molded you from birth. But my heart aches. I see my children who are hurting. They're cast aside like worthless clay. I long to restore, heal, and make beautiful. Will you join me? My hands will guide yours. There is much to do, and much joy to find. Don't be surprised when my children mold you. I work in their lives through you, and in your life through them. To my little ones, love them as I love them. Love them as I have loved you.
So over the past few months, Trish and I have started this process. We're not all the way through it yet, and we're still really praying about what it looks like for us. We started this process of becoming foster parents and trying to pray through the idea of fostering to adopt. And so as we were thinking about this Sunday and we're talking about our core values, I just think one of our core values as a church is to make a difference in our generosity. And so I asked Stacy to come, and go ahead and come on out, Stacy, and just share with us. She works with an organization called Horizon International, and they're a local organization. They're in Pendleton, Indiana. And so I just asked her to share for a few minutes just a little bit about what she does and her passion for today, and then how we can be involved as a church.
Thanks.
That's all you.
Thank you. Oh,
You're on.
okay, good. It's always sketchy. So thank you guys for having us, by the way. Orphan Sunday is really dear to my heart, and about 4 years ago, I was laying on my bathroom floor, broken. I didn't know what God was going to have in the plans for me and a family. My husband and I weren't able to have kids, and so I found myself just laying on the floor, turning it over to God. And that day I went to church and sat there, and I was like, you have to lift this from me, Lord. I can't carry it around anymore. I've been carrying it around for 5 years. And on the screen, it was a go team to South Africa. And I remember saying very vividly in my head, you're nuts, Lord. There is no way that a white girl from middle Ohio is going to go to South Africa. And I knew that that message was for me. And so I said, if you're serious, show me next week. So of course he did. And I listened, I was obedient, and I found myself in South Africa in October. And we had sponsored kids in that time frame before, and a few years before that. And we just, I sat there, and we were in the middle of a drop-in center, which is how Horizon International works. They have drop-in centers in different areas in Africa, 5 countries. And you get to meet your sponsored kiddo. And all of a sudden I hear, Mom. And a teen girl comes running up to me, puts her arms around me, and says, I've waited for you to come. And at that moment, I felt the Holy Spirit just lift that burden from me. Sponsorship is not just a check. It's not just a transaction. You are actually feeding into these kiddos, into these orphans who don't get that love, who don't get that support. This isn't a sales pitch, but I am saying that if it is on your heart to love an orphan, to sponsor an orphan, please just come and see me, because it doesn't just change their life, but it changes our lives as well. So when I came back from that trip, I was on fire. I was like, everyone needs to sponsor an orphan. Everyone needs to do something. And I came back on fire and got involved with Christian Alliance for Orphans. I've been volunteering with them for 4 years. And Orphan Sunday is now in 85 countries. And it was started by a little, he is little. He's like this tall. But Pastor Billy started it with a widow giving a head of cabbage in church. And then it was brought back to the States in 2003. So just that woman who started giving just a cabbage, one person can change and create a world of hope for one kiddo. So.
After the service, Stacy has a table out there for child sponsorship, if that's something that God has laid on your heart. We just want to participate in that and just be obedient to that, whatever that looks like for you. And my wife and I, we have an eclectic child sponsorship. We sponsor, I think, three or four kids from Compassion, and then we sponsor 1 or 2 kids from Food for the Hungry. And about 4 years ago, my son Elijah, who actually got us our first child, Tricia and I used to travel and speak for Compassion. And so we had all these packets that were coming to our house. And Elijah filled out the card. He was like 12 years old. He filled out the card. He's like, I'm sponsoring this one, which basically meant I'm signing you up to sponsor this one, and because he had no money. And so he was generous with our cash. And so we were able to fly to Nairobi, and they bussed, Brian is the name of this little boy. They bussed him in 4 hours from his village to meet us. And so there's pictures out there, there's names out there, but there's little people out there. And we could have a really huge impact in their life. What I love about Horizon is all the kids that you're going to see out there, they're orphans. They don't have any parents. And so you guys get to come along and be their spiritual parent and their financial parent in just a few dollars a month. So if that's something that you want to do, by all means, I want you to stop out at the table. And we can't fix all of the world's problems, as you saw on Tuesday, with all this, and as you've seen on Facebook every single day since. But we can have a little bit of impact, and that can go a long way. So I know for many of you, It's been an emotional week with the election, and no matter what side you're on, it's been emotional. And so I'm grateful that we're recentering ourselves. We wanted to talk about, kind of use the election as just this play on words of State of the Union, because every single year the president takes time to define the reality of our country and to cast vision of where we're going and who we are as a country, which is going to take place in January for our new president. And so we want to take time, because we have about 150 to 200 brand new people at Hope City. We want to take time to go through our core values and just say, okay, here's who we are as a church. Here's what we stand for. Here's the hills that we're going to die on. Here's what we want to become. Here's the things that we value. Here's the things that we want to live out. Because here's the reality. Our beliefs as a church are not nearly as impactful as our values. And some of you who have grown up in the church are like, whoa, I don't believe that. Doctrine is so important. Doctrine is important for people who are in the church. Doctrine is not important for people who are far from God. They don't care about doctrine. They care about our behavior. Right? It doesn't matter who you voted for. It doesn't give you any excuse to treat anybody unlovely. Right? How we treat people really dictates how they view Jesus, not what we believe. We can say we believe in love, but if we're constantly being a jerk, it doesn't matter what we say. We can say that we believe in God who provides hope, but if we're constantly hopeless, it doesn't matter what we believe. And so we wanted to talk about our core values, because our values are going to dictate how people in this community see us as a church. And we can have the greatest doctrine, we can have the most sound biblical scholars, we can, look at passages of the scripture and bring all kinds of biblical meaning, but if we don't love this community, if we don't live our lives as a beacon of hope in this community, it does not matter what we believe. People will not care, because it will be irrelevant to their life. And so what I want to talk about, what we want to talk about over it's a 5-week series, and so this is our third week. The first week we talked about this idea of risk-taking faith, that God has called us to take risks. God has called us to step out in faith. And many of you who are here at a brand new church that is portable and meets like in 2 different places, Stephen texted me, he's like, dude, it's amazing. Our new creative arts pastor, he texted me this week, he's like, it's amazing. We're 8 weeks old, we already have 2 campuses. And so it's really awesome. And so I love that. I just love that optimism. And you guys just hopped on board, right? You guys just said, okay, it doesn't really matter. And as Amanda was up here, talking about things that we need to be grateful for, the first thing that came to mind is I'm grateful for a woman that plays electric guitar. I'm thankful for that. That was just awesome. I know there's a lot of women that play electric guitar, but only one at our church. So I'm really grateful for that. And, I'm grateful for you guys, that you guys will just follow us from the Ritz Charles over to here. There's a few Sundays in the next 12 months that we're not able to use that building. And so you guys just said, hey, the church isn't about a building, it's about people. And so we're just gathered here, and we're Hope City Church in just a different location. And so I'm grateful for that. And so we talked about that risk-taking faith. And then last week, Trish did an amazing job talking about this idea that everyone is welcome. That it doesn't matter what they believe, they can belong before they believe. And that oftentimes the most valuable thing in life is to wrestle with this idea of everyone being welcome, because not everyone is like us. And so if we're going to be the church that God has in mind, we're going to have to be willing to wrestle through our own brokenness and allow broken people to come in here wrestling with God. And we need to create an environment where they feel safe and they feel welcome and they feel like they belong. It's one of the things I love about our First Impressions team and about our setup team. They came in this morning earlier than they typically do, because we've never been in this building before, and they worked their tails off to create an environment where you feel welcome, where we transform a school into a church, and hopefully you felt like you had a friendly face when you came in. And they set the table for that. They set the table for God to show up, because everyone is welcome here. And today I want to talk about this idea of generosity. And I know when we talk about generosity, one of our values as a church is that we want to be irrationally generous. We want to be rational about a lot of things, but we want to, if we're going to really be a church that's about risk-taking faith, there are going to be moments that we're going to be irrationally generous. We're going to have to step out, and if we want to make an impact in our community, it's not necessarily about how much we can get, but how much we can give. And so as I was thinking about that, I just thought, man, 9 weeks into a church, we're going to talk about, people are going to think we're talking about money, and I'm not really talking, I'm going to talk about money, I'm talking about giving, but I'm really talking about our heart. And for many of you, you've been once or twice, maybe you've had a bad church experience, maybe you were burnt by the church, maybe you had a church that really misused funds, or you didn't like how they spent money, or they were all about money. And so I just want to take just maybe 2 or 3 minutes and just explain to you a little bit about how Hope City is structured and how our finances are managed before we talk about this idea of generosity. Because it does me no good to talk to you about being generous if you don't really trust the organization that is asking you to be generous, or the people that are asking you to be generous. And so our church does not have elders yet, where our goal is to, by August of 2017, to have a group of leaders in our church called elders. It's a biblical office that the Bible outlines of people in the church that lead and guide and shepherd and oversee myself, our staff, the finances, all of that. Well, we have a bunch of new people, and so it did not make any sense to entrust one of the most important roles in the church to people that we didn't know. And so we have 6 pastors right now that serve as an advisory board for our church. Aaron Brockett at Traders Point, Josh Huseman at Mercy Road, Matt Keller is a pastor of Next Level Church in Florida, Mark Malin is a pastor of a church called Oakbrook Church in Kokomo, and I'm forgetting somebody. And Greg Lee, who kind of is the chairman of the, that's funny, I forgot him. He oversees the whole team. He's the pastor of a church called Suncrest Christian Church in St. John, Indiana. And Trish and I meet with those guys once a month. They get all of our financials. They look through that. They try to help us with all kinds of direction and questions and accountability. And they just really hold us accountable. More than just holding us accountable, they hold up our arms. They encourage us on this journey of church planting, because you feel crazy church planting. I mean, it's a crazy journey. And you work really hard, and then you just stand out there and you hope people show up, and you hope people get involved in community or connection groups. And you hope that the vision that God has laid on your heart actually comes into fruition. And these guys serve as kind of an overseeing group of people that allow us to do what we do, and that keep us trustworthy for the people who are investing and being stewards of their resources when it comes to Hope City. The first check that Hope City got was about 1 year and 3 months ago, and it was a check for $15,000 from a commercial real estate developer in Nashville. And it kind of freaked me out. We had like $126 in the bank as a church. We hadn't even moved here yet, and this guy heard me speak at my old church, and he wrote a check for $15,000. And I'm like, there is no way I need to be responsible for this. And so the very first money that we spent as a church was for an accounting firm in Atlanta called Mag Bookkeeping. And so they oversee all of our finances. They create all the financial reports. They oversee all accounts payable, all accounts receivable. And we just have layers of accountability. Any expense over $500, one of our advisory board members has to approve it in addition to me. And so we just don't feel like we can be too careful, and we don't feel like we can be too transparent in the area of finances, especially in our culture today. And so when I say I want to talk about generosity, it's not because this church needs money. God has provided for our church. And it's not because I want something from you, it's because I want something for you. And some of the most stretching and some of the most gratifying times of my life have come when I have chosen to be generous. Not just generous with money, generous in my heart, generous with time. And I struggle with this. I struggle in this area. I'm not going to lie to you. My wife will hand somebody, $5 outside Chick-fil-A, and I don't like that. I'm like, hey, you know how much money? He's probably making $120,000 a year. That's my first, I'm just being straight with you. That's my first comeback. So this isn't something that I've mastered. This is something that God is working on in me. And if we're going to become a generous organization, it starts by the people who are involved in that organization being generous. We can't be something corporately that none of us have chosen to be individually. It's not going to happen. You can't take on a corporate value that people inside that system, inside that organization don't value in and of themselves. And so I'm an employee of the church. I get paid on twice a month, but the money that you give on Sunday does not pay me. I have raised my salary for not just a year, but 1 year and 4 months. I have a group of churches that have agreed to pay us through Hope City to take the burden off of our church until we can grow into that. When we decided to hire Stephen, we didn't have his salary sitting in the bank, just waiting to be spent. And so I went out and talked to some friends and high net worth individuals who believe in our vision and our values, some other churches, and we've been able to raise part of Stephen's salary to help him acclimate and make the transition to Hope City in a way that doesn't submarine us as a church, but gives us who I believe is God's choice for us as a creative arts pastor. And And so God is providing for our church. This isn't about us being desperate and needing money. This is about us saying, okay, how do we value irrational generosity? How can we adopt that as a value? And so I want to look at this. I'll just be straight with you. Most people in the church hate talking about money. I'm not really a great fan of it. Like, I didn't really oh, I can't wait to talk about generosity. It's not me. But at the same time, we talk about the things that matter most to us, and I want to just have an honest conversation about it today. And so I want to look at this passage of Scripture in 1 Timothy chapter 6, and this is Paul talking to Timothy, and he's giving him instructions on how to lead this brand new church, okay? He says this in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. It says, "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment." Now, I want to stop there before we start making application, because here's the deal. If you're like me when I read that, I'm like, well, that verse isn't for me, because I'm not rich. Right? I don't perceive myself as rich. I mean, I live in a nice house, and I have nice things, but there are a lot more people that are richer than me. Right? If you stacked my wealth up against other people, I mean, I have a kid in college and a kid getting ready to go to college. I feel like I'm poor, right? I feel like I'm paycheck to paycheck is how I feel, right? And I feel like all of my money is getting ready to get siphoned out because of college. And so I don't think I'm rich. But here's the deal. If you like struggle with that with me, like I do, if you own a car, you're in the top 6% of wealth in the world. If you own a car, or if your bank owns a car and you drive it. If you have a house, you're in the top 3% of wealth in this world. You're rich. If you make over $37,000 a year in your home, you're in the top 6% of wealth in this world. You're rich. I don't just have a house. I have 3 houses for my cars. I have a 3-car garage. I like my car so much, I get to park it inside. That's how rich I am. And here's the deal. I have so much stuff, I can only fit 1 car in that 3-car garage, right? Because it overflows out into the garage. Some of you are so rich, you don't have enough room at your house for all your stuff, and so you pay another payment for a storage unit because of all the stuff that you have that you can't even put in your own house, right? We are rich. We don't understand that we're rich, but we're rich. We don't feel rich, but we're rich when you compare our lives to the lives of people all across this world. We have so much. And so Paul is telling Timothy to command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant. Jesus on several occasions found himself teaching and interacting with rich people, and he said very frankly, hey, rich people are going to have a more difficult time living out kingdom values than poor people. Rich people are going to find money competing for their heart a lot more than people who don't have stuff. And it's why if you look at the top givers across the world, people who live below the poverty line give the highest percentage of their income away. That's crazy if you think about it. And so Paul says, hey, first of all, command those who are rich, which is pretty much all of us in this room, not to put their hope in wealth. Then verse 18, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up for themselves treasure as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they will take hold of the life that is truly life. Now, it's interesting that this text doesn't say, command those who are rich to be good. A lot of the Bible talks about us being good. Talk about not just our behavior, but our heart. That's what that word be would get to. It'd get to your heart. Not just how you live, but why you live out those things. In this text specifically, Paul says to us, command those who are rich to do good. In other words, there's a level of doing, there's a level of opportunity that only people who have wealth, only people who have affluence can accomplish. There's a level of impact that people who are well off financially, which maybe you don't even feel that way, but you are if you live in the United States, and we've already outlined basically how rich you are. There's a level of doing good that is not necessarily reserved for us, but is only attainable by us because other people who have less don't have the options that we have. They don't have the ability that we have. Paul knew about rich people and that rich people have extra time. Now, you may not feel like you have extra time, but for many of you, you only work 5 days a week. Isn't that amazing? You make what you need to live on in 7 days by just working 5. And then for me, I'm like, we're already thinking about vacation. Like, I get paid not to work. You get paid by your company. If you get vacation time, they pay you not to show up. Isn't that incredible? There are people that live on less than $1 a day all across this world, and if they don't show up, they don't get paid. There are people who show up at gas stations all across our community to do landscaping projects, and if they don't show up, they don't get paid. You know why? Because they get paid in cash. They don't show up, they don't get paid. We get paid to not show up. That's how much extra time we have. We get paid to take time off. We get paid to have extra time. And here's what's interesting. Statistically speaking, we spend less of our time, those of us who are rich spend less of our time serving those who are in need than people who don't really have extra time. Rich people have lots of options: movies, going out to eat, Colts games, Pacers games, vacation plans, visiting family, weekend camping trip. We are rich in options of how we can spend our time. And Paul says, hey, be generous with your time. Be generous with your time. Do good and give your time away. Paul knew something else about rich people, that rich people have extra money. You may not feel like you have extra money, but all rich people do. It's an interesting fact that the more money that we make, the lower percentage people give away. And it makes sense to me, because if I made $10, it's not that hard to give away a dollar. If I make, $100, it's not that hard to give away 10. But if I make $1,000 and you talk about giving away 100, because there's, this biblical principle of tithing, to give in 10%. And if I start thinking about that, like, that's a lot of money. You start making $10,000 and you start talking about giving away $1,000. That's college tuition in my book. That's a car for one of my kids. That's a lot of money. $1,000. What about $100,000? If you're going to make $100,000, that means you're going to give away $10,000 if you're trying to follow this biblical principle of tithing. That's hard to do. That's just difficult. It's hard to part with $10,000 just to watch it go bye-bye and not really know if it's ever going to come back in return. It's not like the stock market where you can track its success or failure. You're giving finances and you're giving time away, not knowing if it's ever going to have the return that you thought it would. That's hard to do. And here's what I think. If we polled everyone today, I don't think any of us don't want to be generous. I think all of us would say, man, I want to be generous. I don't want to be selfish. I want to be generous with my time. I want to give time away to good causes. I want to volunteer. I want to do things that help make an impact in this world. I think I always say I want to be generous with my money. I want to be generous with my finances. I want to steward what God has given me in a generous way. I think that's all of our intentions. The problem is intentions don't necessarily set the course for our life. Our choices do. And so we can have great intentions on being generous and really not be generous at all. And so for most of us, the greatest barrier of doing good isn't greed. Most of us aren't greedy. I mean, some of us are greedy, but most of us aren't, okay? But most of us, the greatest barrier is margin. We just haven't been proactive and intentional about creating margin in our life. And the people who give the most time away to serve others have the same 24 hours in a day that we do. Statistically speaking, the people who give the highest percentage of their income away to charity make less than people who don't give their income away. And it's just creating margin. And so I just want to talk to you about what we need to create margin, how we can create margin in our life. And the first principle I want to share with you is we just need to create margin in our time. If you're going to be generous and do good, be generous in good deeds. If you're going to serve others, it doesn't matter if you serve at Hope City. If you're going to serve, the United Way, if you're going to serve other organizations, if you're going to be generous with your time and give that to people who are in need, you're going to have to create margin in your time. And here's the deal. We're busy. We're so busy. Now, as I was thinking about this, this is embarrassing, but I was working on this message as Trisha drove to a speaking engagement this week. I'm in the car because I don't have enough margin in my life. I'm working on my message as I'm driving in the car because that's how busy I am. And as I started thinking about busyness isn't a schedule issue, it's really a heart issue. And I oftentimes find value and identity in how busy I am. And I like to tell people how busy I am. Oh my gosh, it's been a crazy week. Oh my gosh, I'm so busy. Oh my gosh, I can't sit still. Oh my gosh, I have so much to do. Right? And so people ask, how you doing? Oh, I'm worn out. Life is so busy. These kids are wearing me out. We're going to 9 different, softball games and soccer games and basketball games. We're doing all this stuff. And we find our identity in how busy we are. We equate busyness with significance. And so if we're busy, that must mean we're important. If we're busy, then people need us. If we're so busy, then we must be doing something right in life because our schedule is jam-packed. We can be rich in busyness and bankrupt in good deeds. And Paul's saying, don't fall for that. If you're going to be generous, if you're going to do good, if you're going to give time away, you have to create margin. And I don't know what that looks like for you. I can't dictate that for you. That has to be something that you intentionally do. But I do know this, we schedule what's important to us. We put on our calendar what's important to us. And if you're going to create margin, it's not going to happen by accident because other people like to dictate your schedule. I don't know if you know that. Your boss, he loves dictating your schedule. Your kids, they will eat your schedule alive, right? They will. And so if you want to be generous, if you want to grow in generosity and good deeds, if you want to grow in how you serve others, you're not going to do it unless you're intentional about carving out time to do it. It's just not going to happen. When Trish and the next principle is we need to create margin in our finances. We need to create margin in our finances. The truth is we have the money to be generous. We just usually owe it to other people. God has given us the resources to be generous. We just sign off on it and give it away to things that not necessarily we want to, but we feel like we need. When Trish and I got out of ministry in 2005, I was a pastor, got out of ministry, I started a sales job. We had $7,500 roughly in debt, which the national average is $9,800, so I felt like I was good, right? Like $7,500 is not that bad. And so I started working this sales job downtown, never done sales before, and God just like showed up in a really miraculous way, and I just did really well. And so I started like placing all of these people. I was a headhunter. I started placing all these people in these banks, and I would get these checks for like $22,000 to $26,000 at a time. And I'd never seen money like that before. And so we paid off the debt, and then we thought, man, we need some new furniture. Like, let's go buy a couch. And oh, you know what? The boys need new beds. Let's go buy some beds. My big screen is not big enough. Let's put that in the other room and let's get a new big screen so we buy a big screen. And then I wouldn't get paid. It was commission only. I wouldn't get paid for 4 months. And I was like, oh boy. I thought I had a deal. I thought I was going to close. I thought that was going to get paid. And so we started using credit cards to pay our bills. Started using credit cards to pay our mortgage. Tricia went in the hospital. We had a $10,000 deductible that year. And all of a sudden, I go back into ministry 4 years later and we're $41,000 in debt. And it was just overwhelming. I took a 48% pay cut to go into ministry, and our debt is $41,000 in 2009. And we had no margin to be generous. We barely had margin to pay any bills. And so I started working on a side job. I was a full-time pastor, started working a side job, started doing some work for the clients that I had as a headhunter, and over the next 12 months, we paid off all of our debt. But it did not happen accidentally. Getting in debt pretty much felt like it happened accidentally. But if you're going to create margin in your finances, it probably won't be fun and it probably won't be easy. But it's possible. And here's the deal. You don't have to give to Hope City. I'm not telling you to create margin in your finances to give to Hope City, but God grows your heart through generosity. And so you need to give somewhere. You need to give to something. And so if this isn't a church that you feel like you can invest in the vision, that's totally cool. You're welcome to come here for free. We'll never charge you. But I want you to find some place where you can be generous, where you can give, because that's how God grows your heart. And that's God's best for us, was when we're able to be generous. And so often we equate possessions with wealth. And you can be rich in possessions and bankrupt in generosity. It doesn't matter how much you have if you're not generous. And so just some application points as we close. I know we're running late. First is this: pre-decide to give your time in service. Find an organization and give your time. Don't be random. Don't be spontaneous. Be intentional in that. The reason that our church exists is there's a group of people that set aside time to give to it. This isn't the Justin and Tricia show. This could have never happened if it was just us. There's a group of 50 to 70 individuals that give time every week. The reason that your kids are being taken care of and taught about the love of God is because a group of people set aside time. They scheduled it in their calendar to serve in Hope City Kids today. The reason that you're going to have hot chocolate. Surprise, you're going to have hot chocolate after the service because we couldn't bring coffee in here, so we're going to serve hot chocolate and cookies after the service. It's because a group of people are serving at the cafe right after the service. The reason that hopefully you felt welcome you came in is because a group of people worked first impressions, and they say, hey, we want people to feel welcome here. The reason that we were able to experience worship is because these musicians set aside time in their schedule this week to rehearse and to learn music. And the setup team came in at 5:15 this morning and started setting this up so that they set aside time so that you could have a worship experience. And God wants to do that in your life. God wants you to set aside time to be generous in your time. And if that's not here at Hope City, that's okay. Serve in the United Way. Serve the Boys and Girls. Serve somewhere where you can get behind the vision and mission of that organization so that you can become all that God has created you to be. And secondly, pre-decide to be a percentage giver. I believe in percentage giving. Not because it's easy for me. I automate it. Like I automate it so I just have to. Like it's just set. 1st and 15th, it's gone. Like if I don't automate it, then I'm like, oh, I'll pay that next week. Right? I mean, it's just how I am. I stink as a pastor just saying that out loud to you, okay? I'm a horrible Christian. All right? But I just have to automate it. I have to set it aside. It's just a percentage of our income that's gone. And then we give to compassion and food for the hungry over and above what we give to the church. It's just how we do it. And that's automatically drafted too. I want those kids to eat. All right, if it's up to me to be generous, sometimes I'm like, oh, that's $39. That's Olive Garden for me, And so I'm just being straight with you. And so if you're going to be a generous person, it doesn't have to be 10%, but pick a percentage. Maybe it's 3%, maybe it's 5%. Say, okay, God, I'm going to trust you with this. I don't feel like I have margin for it, but I'm going to trust you with it. I'm going to give to an organization. I'm going to give to the church. I'm going to give to something that I believe in the mission and the vision of so that I can watch you not just work in my life, but work in this community. And if you just decide to sponsor an orphan, you're going to see that child, that their life is going to be changed by, I think it's $35 a month. I don't know the exact amounts, but it's probably around that. But something powerful happens when we begin to give our money to something. Our heart follows it. Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. He knew us, right? He knew us. And so when you start giving of your time and your resources to something, your heart naturally follows. And you become a part of that. And that's how we become a generous church, by people who are becoming generous. You don't have to have it all figured out, right? You don't have to be generous 401. You can be a generous person 101. Can just be starting. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be an expert in this. We can all be on a journey to generosity and watch God take something small and do something amazing with it. Not because we're a big organization, but because we have a big heart. And as a church, we're in the red, okay? I'm just going to be honest with you. We have churches that are making up the difference for us as we get going. And that's awesome. God has a vision for our church, and he's providing for it. But as we grow, God is going to call us to trust him in new ways. And right now, we give 6% of everything that comes in away. We give it to missions. Next year, in our 2017 budget, we have 12% budgeted for that. We're going to double it. Why? Because I think we're going to double in generosity. I'm just believing it. And it's not a matter of, well, man, we could use that money to buy more lights. We don't have any movable lights. Well, how can you have a worship service if there's not lights going like this up here? We could buy those. We could. Or we could send people to Haiti to work in an orphanage. Or we could sponsor kids that don't have any food. I'm not saying movable lights are bad. I'm saying that I want our priorities to be stretched, and I want us to be generous. And so we're scheduling it, and we're prioritizing it in our budget so that we know at the end of 2017, we can look back and go, man, look at all the stuff we invested in because of our generosity. And that's how we become the church that God has in mind. Let's pray together. God, thanks so much just for this morning. Thank you for every single person that's here. And it's never like a blast to talk about money and generosity. But you know where our treasure is, there our heart is. And we want to be a church that has a heart of generosity. We want to be a church that is not known for how much they get, but how much they give. And so would you just challenge our hearts? Would you just speak to us? Just allow us to realize that you can take something insignificant and small and do something amazing with it if we trust you. So in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.